Hello and welcome to Iridium Rock and Metal Reviews. And today I've got a new guest on with me by the name of Sean Dawson. How's it going, mate?
It's going good. Well, good, man.
Cool. So Sean's a subscriber to my channel, and I reached out to some people like wanting to get some new blood, if you like, on the channel, some new guests to talk about rock and metal. And Sean reached out to me and said, yeah, I'd like to come on. So Sean, just tell us a little bit about yourself and you know, how you got into this brilliant music that we were into, mate.
Totally. Yeah. So my name's Sean. I'm from California, and so music has always been a part of my life. My dad was a musician, but he did the whole country gospel thing. So eventually I got into my teen years, kind of rebelled, and found a common band that we both like, and that was Stryper. And which actually your review of the album, which kind of kicked it off bigger for you, for your show, is when I found you as well, and Mike posted that. And so common love of Stryper. But yeah, Stryper kicked it off for me, and that's how I got into metal. And of course, I expanded from there as an adult, and kind of finding my own musical forte away from what I was being raised with, and expanded out from there. And to where I eventually, back in 2012, besides playing music everywhere, I got a record contract and came out with my own CD called Revolver and released an album called Stone Altar. So it's kind of the metal meets kind of the Creed, Nickelback stuff that was going on in the early 2000 time frame. So that's kind of what I did there for a little bit. And then so now I'm just kind of gun for hire, playing guitar, drums, and bass wherever needed, and doing vocals wherever needed. So kind of a fun gig to do now.
Oh, nice, man. I mean, I was in a band way back. I don't talk about it a lot on here, but way back when I was younger with my brother, I was in a band when I was really young, you know, but nothing come of that. But we've done some gigs in that of London. It was really good fun. It sort of cost me more than, you know, it sort of costs bands to play rather than getting paid, you know, unless you make it big. But it's getting harder and harder, I think, you know. But
yeah. Even with the record contract, I was still out of pocket more than I ever made. I don't think I've ever made anything in a band that I've ever been in. You know?
Oh, exactly.
But my new gig now is what I do.
Yeah, I mean, I know. We had a guitarist in our band. He went on to be in a band called Panic Cell. They played Download Festival in England. You know how big Download is, didn't you? And still, that, you know, we spoke to him, and still, it wasn't like, even though you're playing that, you haven't made enough money. You still worked full time. You know, it just takes such a lot to become big and make a living off of it. You know, but it's a shame. It is a shame.
Yeah, and the industry's changed. I mean, the industry's totally changed. I mean, I've talked with guys, you know, that, you know, they were big in the, you know, early 80s and stuff, and they played the whole Hollywood strip where, you know, all the bands were coming out of in the early 80s and stuff, from Crew to Poison to, you know, all those guys. And it was different time frame. And even like the guys from Stryper have said this as well. The music industry was totally different then to what it is now. It's a lot harder now. Record labels want you to come in with just a ton of fans before they even look at you. They're not even giving you time of day without tons of fans. And then the payouts are different too. I mean, you used to be able to make tons of money doing this, and now when you're talking 15 cents from Spotify for a song play or something like that, you're just not making the money they used to.
Yeah, we have a go at bands, don't we? Because we want to hear new material, and you can understand why they don't bring albums out. They just don't make the money they used to. You can understand, you know what I mean? That, you know, Iron Maiden bring out one every few years.
When you figure something like iTunes, you're paying 99 cents for a song or something like iTunes. Now, out of that 99 cents, they've got to pay all their people out of that. Yeah. So before the band even gets paid, they're paying lawyers, they're paying the record label. So they're seeing pennies on the dollar for their investment just to give us as fans the music we want to hear. And then we do them a disservice. We only buy one song at a time.
Yeah.
Buy the whole album, guys. Don't buy one song at a time.
Yeah, definitely. Right. Okay. It's great to have you on, man. Really appreciate it for coming on. And Sean had a great idea, because I said to Sean, right, mate, I need, you know, because there's no point in me suggesting stuff, because I usually ask subscribers what do you want to do, what bands do you want to talk about, and then we can see if it matches. So Sean had a great idea where we could expand it a little bit further and talk about the albums that impacted our lives, the main albums that impacted our lives. So, I mean, this was hard, man. I mean, we first of all, Sean said, how about a top 5? A top 5 soon turned into a top 10. But for me, it could have been, I mean, I've got about 15 or 16 that I really wanted to include, and I've been struggling with myself to include all of them on this list. And we will do an honourable mention list because of that, because I really want to mention the ones that just missed out. I'm sure you do, mate. And and also we're going to do it in order of the years they were released. So we're going to go from the oldest one, obviously, first. We'll go with you first, mate, and we'll just swap around if that's all right. So we're just going to talk about the album, how it impacted us, and what we think about it, and that sort of stuff. So go on then, mate.
Yeah, for me, I know, again, we talked about my whole introduction to the metal scene, the metal genre, was 1984 when Stryper came out with Yellow and Black Attack. So I was raised in this like super uber strict religious home, and this was one of the first bootleg demos. Sorry, Stryper, sorry, Mike. That I had a bootleg of this for the longest time, and kept it hidden from my folks because they would always throw it away. If they found it, I just go across the street, get a new copy of it, and play it again. Just Yellow and Black Attack just was something magical about that for me, because I was raised on like Southern gospel, country, quartet type music, and it just drives me bonkers now. But when I go back and I thought about what album had the most impact on me, 1984, Stryper, Yellow and Black Attack, and then right about that time as well, though, we had just got cable TV, and cable TV had MTV, which was doing music videos at the time. And I got introduced to Van Halen's 1984 album, and that one blew me away. Of course, I mean that was just even a step beyond, because production-wise, it was far away. I mean, Van Halen had way more money to spend on sound quality and production, so there was a whole nother level with Van Halen's 1984 and Hot for Teacher and Jump and Panama. So, I mean, that album right there was just a whole nother mind-blowing level for me. And one I go back to as well a lot.
No, man, that's a good choice. I love that album. I love that album. It's just, I think for me as well, that album was, I sort of discovered Van Halen late as well. And I went back more with Van Halen. I don't think that was the first time I heard them, 1984, but that was the one that really got me, that album. I thought it was great. And a lot of variety on there as well. It was a brilliant album.
Yeah, it was a ton of variety on there, ton of, I think Eddie really took even his guitar playing to another level than what he had done previously on some of his other albums, which was I think what made that album really kind of stand the test of time, because, I mean, it's still something that a lot of us go to today. I mean, even country guys like Brad Paisley, for a cool shtick, does Hot for Teacher, with that intro, and between the drums and the guitar on that intro, just fantastic.
It's actually my favorite. It's my favorite Van Halen album, 1984.
Well, and what red-blooded, kid is not going to be like blown away by that music? I mean, come on, seriously.
It's great, man. So, I mean, my first one is all the way back to 1979. So, AC/DC and Highway to Hell. So, I mean, man, I was born in 1970, so I was only 9 at this point, but I was really into this album. Man, we used to have, me and my mates used to have the old tennis rackets out, head banging and all that. The whole album from start to finish, it was my most easily, it was just played every day, maybe 3 or 4 times a day. I mean, I must admit now, I probably overplayed it a bit. If Highway to Hell comes on, I'm a bit, do you know what I mean? But that's what I was having trouble with this list a bit. I was thinking, right, I've got to think about how it affected me back then, because you know, I would never put Highway to Hell on. If I went to choose a song now, I wouldn't put Highway to Hell on because I've heard it so much. But you got to think about how it was back then, and it was just a huge part of my life for years, from 1979 all the way through for many years. Bon Scott was my favourite era of AC/DC.
Oh,
you know,
sure.
I mean, I did like I obviously liked the Back in Black album. I thought it was great, but Bon Scott was it for me. Walk All Over You, Touch Too Much, Shot Down in Flames. Man, what an amazing album. And that was sort of, I suppose I was being introduced to metal then. And we didn't have many metal bands then. It was like AC/DC. I think Motorhead were around at that time. There was a handful of bands. It wasn't many, you know, so it was just the start of Sabbath, obviously. But that's my first choice, mate. 1979's Highway to Hell.
You got another one there?
Sorry,
I kind of did two there. You got another one there?
Yeah, all right, I'll do two and then we'll do one each. So my next one is the next year, 1980, and Black Sabbath, Heaven and Hell.
Oh, fantastic song.
Oh, man, I mean, I'm a massive Dio fan.
Too, but I mean, that song's fantastic.
I'm a huge Dio fan. And even though I did leave Ronnie Dio for a little while, I was talking about this the other day. I think, like, I loved everything he did with Sabbath. I loved the first few Dio albums, and then I left them alone for quite a while, Dio. And I've just started, since I've been doing the channel, people have been suggesting songs to me, and I've been listening to him again. I've got a new puppy I named Dio. I mean, that's there you go. But again, it's the deeper cuts sometimes I like. I mean, Children of the Sea wasn't a real deeper cut, but I love that. Lonely is the Word, the last track on it's just an epic song. And you just can't go wrong with Dio. Even this is a brilliant album throughout the whole album, but I've noticed with Ronnie Dio, he can sing a bland, boring song, and his voice just makes it 10 times better, man.
Oh yeah,
it's just an amazing.
He just had that powerful voice that cut through, you know, in so many different ways. I mean, there was times where, like you say, it would be just a kind of a generic song, but you still felt it because of the way he presented the song and the way his voice just came across. Yeah, you wouldn't listen to that song with anybody else. Yeah. But Dio's voice, I mean, oh gosh, I mean, his voice just came across, and he at least made you think that he was feeling what he was singing. Yeah.
And I think great. Back then, we've spoken about this. I've spoken about this on the channel before as well. Album covers back then were just, you was intrigued by them. I mean, I was only 10, and that album cover was just like, whoa, it seemed really bad, you know, but it just intriguing, you know. It was just like, wow, look at that. And you start hold that album cover, man, for years, like for all these years I was listening to it. And I love the reverse of the album covers, or the back of it. It had like a painting of the band. I just thought it was just absolutely amazing.
I wonder if, you know, with I know it really kind of stems off of Stryper's To Hell with the Devil album cover, but I wonder if they were kind of harkening back to some of Dio's album covers with this new phase of album covers they've been doing. Because, I mean, it's got that kind of, you know, you could see, you know, Dio across the label, you know, if you were to put, you know, his name on just about any recent Stryper album covers. Yeah. I wonder if that was kind of a thought in their mind as they came across these new album covers.
Maybe. I mean, I do appreciate what Stryper are doing with their covers. I think, you know, we miss that. We miss a lot of that. That artwork is just amazing to look at, you know.
Yeah, no, totally.
Well, mate, that's, So.
Yeah, so my next one was 1986, and I would go with Bon Jovi's "Slippery When Wet." You know, I'm a glam metal guy. I mean, Stryper is, you know, kind of where I'm from. So a lot of what I grew up with and the MTV stuff, that's what was played on MTV. So that was my exposure as well. So things like Bon Jovi's "Slippery When Wet," you know, kind of was like, you know, we're talking, you know, "Living on a Prayer." I mean, you can't turn on the radio today, even on a pop station, and not hear "Living on a Prayer." Yeah. But what really kind of grabbed my attention was "Wanted Dead or Alive." That one right there, I mean, these are the pop songs and stuff, not the the B-side stuff, but Wanted Dead or Alive musically was like that intro, the guitar solos on that, and kind of the thematic. And then of course it was used in Young Guns, which was a killer movie. But Bon Jovi's voice too. I mean, he doesn't have what he had back then. Sadly, a lot of these guys don't. But his voice on that song and that whole album was just mind-blowingly good. I mean, his vocal range, was just incredible as well.
They did do some real good. They had a real strong. I mean, I love the debut as well, and they had 4 or 5 albums, didn't they? That were. I mean, not so much now. The fans are screaming out for something similar now, but they're never going to get it now.
No, I mean, you hit like New Jersey, and I think that was kind of their peak. I think after New Jersey, they never were able to really give us what we wanted. Keep the Faith was kind of close, but it never really got there.
No,
and it was more the mellower stuff than the poppier stuff. And but New Jersey was probably the last great Bon Jovi album. But I mean, you listen to the guitar solos on Slippery and Wet. I mean, just some fantastic guitar solo work by Richie Sambora. What a phenomenal guitar player.
Yeah.
And that's one of those too where I think, despite Bon Jovi's voice, they really owe their fame to Richie Sambora's guitar playing. I mean, you look with Bon Jovi trying to do his own stuff now, and it's just not there. I mean, he doesn't have Richie Sambora backing him up. That play on stage that they had on stage, the interconnection between the two, is just not there anymore.
I think he just seems to be going for this wannabe Springsteen type sound now, and he just ain't doing it. They just ain't.
No, totally. Well, I mean, anytime who did he get on stage? Was that what was that? Was it Taylor Swift? I mean, I think would be his name we got on stage with. I think after you get on stage with Taylor Swift, it kind of should signal the end of your metal career.
Yeah.
Put the metal stuff away. Just call it a day. Love what you did back then, but unless you're going to go full hog back into it, you just call it a day. You were on stage with kids. That's it. You're just done.
They definitely did dominate back then, though, man. They were huge. They were absolutely
huge. And they were all over the radio. They were all over MTV. Just routinely. I mean, just dominated the radios for the longest time. Yeah. And the MTV plays. That's for sure.
Definitely, mate. That's a good choice. And we haven't clashed yet. We don't know each other's albums, by the way, everyone. We just, there might be something in here that's similar, or a band, definitely, probably will be. We'll come across something similar. But right, okay, mate. I'm going to 1982 next, and Scorpions and Blackout. So yeah, man. So I mean, they're another band that I wasn't into their 70s stuff at all. I don't mind. They had the odd song that was okay, but as soon as they hit, I think it was Love Drive was the first one, and then right up, I mean, they're even producing decent music these days. But Blackout's my favourite album. They sort of hit that commercial peak. Every song on here was very catchy. I mean, some of the songs I've got written down here. No One Like You was just an amazing single. You Give Me All I Need, which is another sort of slowish song, and When the Smoke Is Going Down, closing the album. I mean, man, their ballads though were so good. They could write a ballad, and it was always acoustic led, wasn't it? With Scorpions, they did an acoustic ballad, and they come in. Amazing, really epic sort of. And with Scorpions, I used to really look forward to their ballad. What's their ballad going to be like on this album? And I used to really look forward to. I mean, look at the ballads they've done.
When's it changed?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think at that period, there again, I think with that album they started to drop off a little bit. Was it that? That was Crazy World, was it? Crazy World, I think, that album.
Yeah, Crazy World.
But I think that was at their peak again with Blackout. Man,
that was their peak, yeah.
The album cover again with the old.
I think of a Scorpion ballad.
Yeah.
I think of a Scorpion ballad. I think When's It Change and that video song. And what was going on during that time frame with, you know, the whole Cold War aspect and Ronald Reagan and, the, you know, our international relationships at that time. And I think that song really kind of, you know, spoke to where we were at, you know, at that time frame, which I think was why that song, to me, as a Scorpion song, really hit home and stood out for me.
I mean, as well, that song, I mean, everyone knows that song, doesn't they? I mean, even though Blackout is a huge album with metal fans or rock and metal fans, and it's it's a lot of people's favourite Scorpion album, but you know, if I played No One Like You to someone who doesn't know heavy rock music, they probably wouldn't know who it was. But then you play Wind of Change, they know what that is. They know what that is straight away. They know what band it is. Exactly.
Yeah.
So
but No One Like You. I mean, that one's the guitar work again. I mean, as a musician, I go back to the guitar work on that, and it's just like it's some brilliant stuff on that album. But that No One Like You, it's a fantastic song.
Do you know what I love about
the drums are driving through?
Yeah. Do you know what I love about the guitaring back then for Scorpions? What I loved about them is that they did a lot of lead parts within the song, not just the solos. They would play like within the verses, and they would break out into some really cool guitar stuff. Brilliant band. I loved Scorpions for years, and it's good that they were from Europe as well. When, you know, obviously a little bit later on, they got even bigger in between the whole LA glam scene, didn't they? They were still there, as big as everyone, which was cool to have someone different.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and what was cool about Scorpions is they didn't try to, while they had elements of that sound, they were one of those bands that didn't try to do the whole glam look. I mean, you had Crew, you had Poison, you had Stryper, you had, you know, Hollywood Dolls, you had a number of different bands that were out, LA Guns and all those that were out there at that time that were doing the whole glam look, but Scorpion really didn't do that, you know, and it would be guys like Scorpion, Skid Row, Guns N' Roses. You could count probably on one hand the guys that weren't doing the glam look compared to guys like Stryper and the others, you know, but still had elements of that sound, which was metal and cool.
They weren't good looking enough, were they? They were good looking enough.
That's a great segue into my next album, though. So my next album would be like 1986 again, and that'd be Stryper's To Hell with the Devil. I mean, fantastic album. And, you know, I had, up to this point, had not seen a Stryper video, had only seen, you know, the pictures of, you know, inside the album. But I didn't have the albums. They were banned from my house, being raised in a religious home. So I always had the demo cassettes, you know, and so by the time around To Hell with the Devil came out, I was able to get my first Stryper album. My parents were like, okay, if we don't allow him to at least listen to some Christian metal, he's going to listen to other stuff, and he's going to sell his soul to the devil, and we're going to have lost him for sure. So, you know, To Hell with the Devil came out, and I was able to buy my first Stryper album at the bookstores. And so I was excited. And I remember the back of the album was facing out, and all I could see was the faces. And I was walking through the music store with a friend of mine, and I look over, and all I see is Robert's face. And I go, man, she's hot. And a buddy of mine goes, dude, and he picks up, and there's the chest hair of Robert sticking out. I mean, he was looking like Heather Locklear, you know, on the back of that album cover. Yeah. So, but, you know, I was like, oh, I want to gouge my eyes out now. But the album, I mean, Abyss just kind of like sucks you in. I mean, you're now listening intently into what is going to happen next. And then that guitar slide into that, you know, Robert's drum playing To Hell with the Devil. I mean, you are just grabbed by the throat at this point, and you're listening to this album. Yeah. Commercially, it wasn't a very commercial album. I never thought To Hell with the Devil was a very commercial sounding album, but it was unique for Stryper and the other Christian music artists that were out there. Yeah. I was looking at it like Bloodgood came out at the same time for Christian artists. Barren Cross came out the same year. They were nowhere near on the same level as what Stryper was doing with To Hell with the Devil. Yeah. But musically, it was a fantastic album, and it spawned some great hits for them, you know, on MTV. And it allowed them to go platinum, you know. So, I mean, just a fantastic album, fantastic guitar playing. But yeah, that was probably as a kid, that was, you know, the most impactful album on my life. You know, and even going forward, I still play that album a lot. You know, it's just one of those that it stands the test of time, you know, both musically and, you know, for me, lyrically. As a person of faith, it holds up lyrically, you know, from a faith standpoint for me. It encourages me, it inspires me in a lot of different ways. So I really enjoy that album as well. That's probably one of the bigger albums on my list of impactful albums to me personally.
Yeah, it was huge for me as well, man. I mean, it was a bit different for me in England. I mean, we weren't, I didn't know anyone who went to church in England. I didn't know anyone personally who went to church. And it wasn't, you know, it's always felt like in England, as in America, it's a lot, you know, Christianity is a huge thing, but over here it's not so much. And I suppose where I was into heavy metal as well, it was like meant to be the opposite of Christianity, heavy metal. It was meant to be that way, even though that's how I thought when I was young. You know, I don't think that way now. When I was young, it was like, you know, and I used to listen to the Striper albums and just think of them. I just blanked out the lyrics, you know, and I just thought of them as, and they used to have a lot of double meanings. So you could sing. I used to think, singing. They could be singing about a girl, and that's how I used to think, you know, rather than God. And that's just the way I used to listen to them. But it's still a massive part of my life. And just you spoke about the music on that album, man. The intricacy of the guitaring. I mean, all the way through their career, the lead guitars and the way they come in and out of twin lead bits. They do stuff that other bands just don't do. Amazing, absolutely amazing.
Yeah, no, I mean that was the lead guitar aspect of it, as far as their double leads, you know, the harmony lead solos that they do, and it's like it's a staple of what they do. Other bands, I mean, they would try to do it and it would come across as a cool thing, but none of them really. I mean, to get into maybe something like, you know, some of the Leonard Skinner stuff where they did that a little bit more, and you go, wow, you know, that was kind of a staple of what some of their stuff was. But, you know, with Striper, I mean, it was like, it was effortlessly, you knew it was there. It felt like home whenever they did it. You're kind of blown away by it. Yeah. Still, you know, no matter how many times they do it, even today, you still go, oh, that's just another fantastic lead. That's just another fantastic. Yeah. That's what I expect. That's what I want to hear. You want to hear that. When you don't hear it, you're kind of like, I got it wrong.
No, it's a brilliant choice, mate. It's a brilliant choice. Right, okay, my next one.
So on that one is like,
go on, mate. Yeah.
I was going to say, on To Hell with the Devil, the ones that stood out to me was like The Way and More Than a Man.
Yeah.
Those were like, those weren't their commercial songs on that one, but they were just kind of like, they were just there's something about the way they drove straight through. They were chunky, just kind of like chunk, 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 chunk. And it was just, that was like, I had not been exposed to that aspect really of metal at this point. And it would later lead me into stuff like Priest and Iron Maiden, because it had those elements in those two songs that was kind of priestly and Iron Maiden-ish, which was cool to me. And it would later lead me on into other aspects of metal like thrash and speed metal that became a staple later on in my later years.
Yeah. I mean, they're almost, them two songs you spoke about, I always think of those two songs together. Just funny that you mentioned it, More Than a Man and The Way. They always, for me, they're very similar but different. I always think of them together. They're almost galloping, aren't they? Like Maiden, like you said, like a galloping sort of riffing.
Yeah.
Superb. Absolutely superb.
Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant, mate. You all done on that one?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Well, my next one, we're talking about Maiden. Well, I'm talking about Maiden now. 1983 and Peace of Mind. So, man, I mean, Maiden, I don't know. I sometimes try and think of my favourite band. And I just think about all the years that I've been into this band, like from the beginning, from 1980, actually, when they first released their debut album. And this Peace of Mind, that isn't actually my favourite album, but it's very close for Maiden. This is where they were just doing no wrong. Power Slave, the next one's actually my favourite album. But Peace of Mind was just huge. I just remember it was just non-stop on my record player from beginning to end. I remember the gatefold sleeve, and they were sitting around the dinner table with Eddie's brain on the table. I just thought it was just like, I mean, it just brings out so many images in your mind, doesn't it? Like when you're looking at this artwork, and, and you've got the lyrics there, and I really miss that. I really do miss that, all that stuff. But this had some epic songs on it, man. I mean, I've written down, they all are good for me, but Where Eagles Dare, one of the best openers ever to an album, no matter what band it is. They straight into Revelations, which is just like a doomy, sort of slower, amazing track. And even the deeper cuts on here, Still Life, that's just an amazing song. It just shows you the quality they had then. They were less progressive, obviously, back then, but still so inventive. You know, just like the leap they made from having Paul Di'Anno in on those first two albums. Then the leap they made having Bruce Dickinson come in, you know, with Number of the Beast, and then this one, and then Power Slave. I was just blown away, man. Just blown away. Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it was when Bruce came on. That's when I really got introduced to Iron Maiden and stuff, and you know, some of the more commercial stuff that they later came out with, stuff like, you know, you mentioned Power Slave and stuff. You know, I mean, that was some phenomenal stuff by Maiden. You know, and so, you know, just killer stuff. I didn't probably get introduced really to Maiden until, gosh, I was probably in my 20s in the Marine Corps. We were listening to bands during downtime, and we would just crank out whatever. So it was stuff like Megadeth and Maiden and Priest that I would get introduced into in my 20s. But then when I was listening to it, like I said, it was like familiar in a way because of stuff like, you know, The Way and More Than a Man from Stryper. So it was just like, and then, you know, vocal styles with like Baron Cross, because he had vocal style similar to Dickinson. So it was just like, okay, this is just an extension of that. You know, for me, it was like, wow, okay, that's where, you know, these bands that I grew up with got their, you know, ideas from, or, you know, inspiration from. So, you know, it was easy to pop in a, you know, Iron Maiden and just go, wow, just musically and vocally, and, you know, just phenomenal stuff.
Well, I think as well, they didn't ever stick to the, you know, formulas, did they? I mean, they would do a verse and a chorus, and then they would have like a 6-minute guitar solo, then have a verse and a chorus on the end, and that'd be it. Like, you know, there'd be no, you know, it's like bands, you know, back then when it was like verse, chorus, verse, chorus, guitar solo, verse, chorus. They used to do, you know, it was so unpredictable and so inventive. I think that's what made them stand out, you know.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was, they had a roadmap, but it was kind of like, almost like, at times you almost wondered if it was like they were the jam band of metal, you know, kind of like the Grateful Dead of metal, where, you know, were they really planning it out, mapping it out, or were they just kind of riffing off of each other in the studio, and they go, that's a cut, let's go.
maybe, mate, maybe, yeah. Well, that's it. That's my Maiden one, mate. 1983, that was.
Yeah, so I would jump over to 1989, and with 1989, a buddy of mine, I was hanging out over at his house, and he put on this cassette of a band called Whitesnake, and it was Slip of the Tongue. And Coverdale's vocals, I probably is still to this day, just absolutely blows me away. He wasn't one of them high-end singers. I mean, he could hit those high notes, but he was always comfortable in his mid-range, and it was solid. And on that album, you had Steve Vai playing lead guitar, and getting introduced to Steve Vai at the same time on an album that just had so much metal riffery on that. I mean, just from hooks to solos, just wow. I was just, it was incredible. And when I think about it, I mean, you had tons of hits that would be like MTV style hits on that album, and they were great. But it was these other ones like Judgment Day and Sailing Ships. These ones that were more like epicness with, you know, the violins and the cellos and some orchestration going on, that really blew my mind at the time, because it was always straight metal for me. None of the other guys that I was listening to at the time really had that going on. And to have, you know, these elements of classical music thrown in on top, you know, Judgment Day, no, Sailing Ships, it's got this kind of like Led Zeppelin-esque Stairway to Heaven type vibe to it, but it was uniquely metal. It was heavy metal. It wasn't, it was still their own thing. It was, and it blew my mind to hear, you know, the lyrics, the poetry within the lyrics that, you know, Coverdale did on that song. And then the way that song just built up and it just sent you flying. It's just one of those albums that I still go back to it today. In fact, I was just rocking it out the other day and I was telling my dad I was coming on the show and I was telling him about this one particular album. And he was like, wow, yeah, that's definitely an epic song. Yeah. It was epic metal, epic. And he's not a metal person, but he was able to appreciate the musicality of that and the solos of that album. And, you know, yeah, as a kid, that was probably 1989. I was 15 maybe at the time, you know, 14, 15 at the time. So that was just a whole nother level when you're a teenage kid listening to something like that.
I mean, that album's a little bit overlooked, I think. I mean, it's the album before, isn't it? It's the 1987 one that everyone talks about with Whitesnake. For me, I was more, which this is unusual for me because I'm a real commercial, you know, I love commercial, you know, commercial bands. I love it when it's catchy and a hook. But I actually preferred the earlier Whitesnake. I preferred the bluesier sort of Whitesnake, the earlier ones. Yeah, I mean, but that was just me. I mean, I think Coverdale's voice was a lot, even though it was great later on, it was really strong on those really early albums, you know, just so much soul in the guy's voice. Unbelievable, man. I mean, they're another band, aren't they? They've had two stages of their career, like a lot of bands. They had a bluesy sort of beginnings, and then they went more sort of melodic, classic rock. You know, they sort of sound two different sort of sounds. A lot of bands have done that, and they Journey, Scorpions, we was talking about earlier on. They have these two parts of their career. Some bands even have more, you know. But I love Coverdale's voice, man. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah, Coverdale's voice is great. You know, I think with like the earlier stuff from Whitesnake and the more bluesier stuff, I think that's Coverdale's pocket. I mean, I think that's where he's most at home. I think he can do the metal stuff, and he does it really well. But I think what you liked about it was he was sitting in his pocket. He was sitting in his area where that's just classically him. Yeah. That's just who he is. Yeah. And so he was just at home with more of that stuff. But I think, you know, like, you know, many other artists in the 80s, as they're coming through, they weren't getting that commercial breakthrough. You know, why be in a band? You know, the hipster thing is to say, oh, we're not going to sell it. That's hipster garbage. You're not in a band to sit there and play the bar all day long with 5 people and get, you know, half of the bar tab. You know, you're just not. It doesn't pay the bills. No. You want to get signed to a label. You want to get noticed. You want to get played. And I think a lot of bands in the 80s, like Scorpions, like Whitesnake, you know, realize they need to, in Journey, they need to step it up into that commercial marketplace. You know, because you don't want to be playing for bar tab. I mean, that's just reality of you know what we do as musicians. We want to entertain people. We want to have mass impact. We want to get you know our music out there, and we want to make a crap ton of money. Let's just be real. You know, and so in the 80s they had an opportunity to do that, and so you know, good on them. They did a solid job, and bringing on guys like Steve Vai to was just fantastic stuff. I mean, you can't. That was a great combination. And the previous 1987 album, again, massive hits on that one. I mean, there's so many good songs on that album, and it just, again, tons of riffs and different stuff going on there. Classic metal albums. I mean, either one of those, you can't go wrong.
No, they definitely.
But we're talking about, you know, what impacted us where we were at the time. So, you know, as a 14-year-old kid, 15-year-old kid, that album just was like, wow, what's this? And it would be later that I'd go back and find the 1987 one and just be equally blown away by the straightforward metal of that album.
Yeah. I mean, look, man, a lot of it is, it's your age. When these albums come out, it is your age. I mean, a lot of people, I mean, the Maiden albums for me, sorry, just quickly going back to Maiden, it's a good example. Peace of Mind and Power Slave were massive for me because of that period in time. I was that age. A lot of people say, like, you know, their favourite Maiden album, for instance, is Fear of the Dark, which is like nowhere near, you know, for me, it's doesn't even touch. But that could be the first time that people got into Maiden, so that's their favourite album, you know, or the first time they heard Maiden. It just depends how old you are and what album's out at the time. And like, you know, if you were older, you might have preferred the 1987 album if that hit you at the right time. It just depends, doesn't it? What age you are, I suppose.
Yeah, no, and I think that's what's great about a list like this. Is something for you know the viewers to keep in mind is, you know, we're talking about albums that impacted us personally. Not so much that were the greatest albums of the time or by that particular artist. Yeah. So, you know, if we're not hitting the albums that you guys necessarily like, we're not talking about the bands that you like or that were the big hits at the time. That's not what this is about, what we're talking about here. It's more about what impacted us at a specific time in our life as we look back on the most impactful albums that hit us. Yeah. So, I mean, you may have a whole other album that hits you. And we're really kind of hitting on to the heavy metal aspects of it. I mean, I could go into a dozen other bands at the time, a dozen other groups at the time that weren't necessarily metal that had an impact on me at that different stages of my life. But this is a metal show, so we're talking about the metal aspects of stuff. Yeah. And, you know, so that's kind of where we're at today.
Definitely, mate. Well put there. Well put. It is very personal and subjective, obviously. So,
yeah, totally.